but we are in the middle of a whole lot of stuff going on. Valencia County is moving entirely in the wrong direction. Um, you can take whatever opinion you have um, as far as what you think the pandemic is or isn't. And certainly everyone's entitled to their perspective on those things. But the numbers directly impact us. So if there are things that are um, outside of the realm of what government entities have dictated as being acceptable levels, then we are going to experience restrictions. Um, there was a ruling that came out from the New Mexico Supreme Court. It was an article I was reading earlier today, and kind of like to share a little bit of that with you because it impacts things from this perspective. Many of us do not work in the levels of government, whether judiciary, executive branch, or legislative, where we have a lot of direct experience with rulings, court rulings, what they mean, how they impact things. And this particular season that we're in is one that the governor certainly does have the authority to rule on. So earlier today, there was an article that came out. Well, it was shared with us. It came out Friday. And it was the New Mexico Supreme Court issuing a full opinion. So I'm going to be reading a little bit from New Mexico Political Report. It says New Mexico Supreme Court issued a full opinion regarding a ruling. Just a second, let me admit Ness. Let's see if I managed to get this right. Ness. I think you're coming in. I have no idea if we're actually live or not.
Oh, nice. Should I check my Facebook real quick?
Yeah, I didn't think I was live earlier, but I guess I ended up being live, and then I think I'm live. Yeah, I'm looking at on my phone, which is disappearing for my lack of green screen. I'm looking at a picture of you and me on the phone. So I managed to do it.
Nice.
Get it done right. So I was kind of launching into something. I know you were taking care of some business that needed to be talked about, but I kind of wanted to open a little bit with a discussion of a ruling the Supreme Court put out on Friday, and so the Supreme Court.
So brother, real quick, brother, are we live on Freedom's or on your Facebook?
On Freedom.
Because when I got on now, I didn't see it.
It says right there, man.
Oh, live on Facebook.
Yeah, live now on Freedom Worship Center's timeline.
Oh, on the timeline. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Well, welcome to Table Talk. Sorry, brother, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, back and better than ever for 2020.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a lot of discussion. I'm not being critical of this, but from this perspective, there's been some rallies, there's been some protests, prayer gatherings, and call them whatever you want, where people have wanted to really make some definitive statements about what they believe, why they believe it, and what they think they should have the liberty to engage in. And I don't hold that against anybody. We have that right to discuss these things. But one of the things that comes up, and I kind of started the segment with this, the scientific data, which the governor and Department of Health make available, scientific data is showing that things are trending in the wrong direction in Valencia County. And so, what people do in other counties, I try and stay home as much as possible. I lack some self-discipline. I'm paying for it with some weight gain and, some other things that are just, maybe not necessarily the greatest health choices overall. But I don't want anybody to get sick, and I don't want anybody to die, and I don't want to be part of any of that happening. So there is some discussion about how people feel about whether the governor has or does not have the authority. If the numbers continue to trend in the direction they're going, I think it's reasonable to assume, based on previous experience and what took place earlier in the pandemic when the numbers were significantly lower, that we are very likely going to be experiencing or part of a measure of restriction in some form. We talked about it in our Zoom meeting that we had with the leadership the other day. We talked about how I mentioned that if the church judges themselves, they won't be judged. And so we're kind of at that critical point where, as a church, decisions are being made in ours and in others with how we want to proceed, how we want to be perceived, and what our ultimate goal is. And so I would maybe pair this with a sports analogy. I am a sports fan. As I said a minute ago, I don't want anybody to get sick. I don't want anybody to die. And I really appreciate and value the sports watching experience. And so, if for nothing else, from a selfish perspective, let's wear masks so that we don't lose. We got college football right now. I got NFL. My Cowboys almost beat the Steelers yesterday. It was a fabulous game. There was a beat down last night of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The TVs got absolutely rocked. And you know what? Like this, someone said that sports are a reward for a functional society. And I think if we're going to be a functional society, I think sports is an important element. Anyway, I am really off track. Let me get back to this. Did you have something?
No, I'm listening.
Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of go over this. So this is an article that came out in the Mexico Political Report. It's probably been broadcast over the news stations. I don't really watch them. I don't watch them. I don't really watch them. I don't watch them. New Mexico Supreme Court issued a full opinion regarding a ruling they issued from the bench in August. So this is a previous thing. This is now the full expansion of it. That affirmed the governor's authority stemming from the state's COVID-19 public health orders. There's some business owners that had filed against the governor. Justice Nakamura wrote that the court limited their review to two questions. One, whether the state had the power to restrict businesses during a public health emergency. And two, whether the state can issue civil penalties for non-compliance. And in short, the article reads that the answer to both was yes. So I've run across a lot of people. They say my constitutional rights are being violated. I've run across a lot of people that say, we need to protect religious freedoms. Things have spanned the gamut, and I'm not calling anybody out, but I've gotten emails that people are saying, we need to storm the gates of heaven to, change the election results, or, just a bunch of different stuff. And I'm not okay with any of that. I think, the governor has the authority statutorily. Legislature gave it to her, gave it to the office, not to her, gave it to the office a few years ago. There was the creation of the statute that allows for the public health order to give the governor that power. And the governor does have the civil, it's not criminal, the civil authority to issue civil penalties and civil fines. It's important to note that distinction, because a criminal case requires a standard that is beyond a reasonable doubt. And so in this case, they're looking at the preponderance of the evidence. They're saying, okay, well, based on what we can view, it appears, or based on, things we observed, this business, this entity has violated the governor's public health order. And so Ken said in our meeting that prudence is not fear. And I've been thinking about that since Saturday night, and it's just incredibly powerful and incredibly true. We can either be reactionary, get upset about all this stuff, and demand that our rights be honored and recognized, or we can roll with it and figure out new ways to do what we've always done. That's one thing I'm really proud your administration of Freedom Worship Center and the way that you have approached ministry has been very impactful in laying a foundation for being ready to roll with it. It's kind of like being fired up and ready to go.
Motivated. It's good.
Ready to
Yeah,
go.
it's a tough time, right? There's a lot of I guess confusion, a lot of voices going out, people saying, you know, that this is what the church's direction should be, and other people that are saying, well, I don't see it like that. And then so you kind of have I don't know if you call it divisions, but differing thoughts or ways to go about this. And then so then it kind of starts even in the Christian world, who has, you don't have faith because you don't do this and that, and it's a lot of back and forth. Actually, I had gotten the numbers today. We were at 1,400 today for New Mexico. I think that's a new high, if I'm correct. And because I think 1,200 was our previous high, and today we were at 1,400, and I think like 27 in Valencia County itself. And you know, when I think about church services, one talking about masks, you know, I don't think I don't feel believers should just discard the mask and go out and you know, we have faith in God. God's going to take care of us, because throughout this time, in the last couple of weeks or so, I've heard a lot of pastor friends of mine that contracted COVID, and now they're out. Me myself, I came in contact yesterday with someone that was possibly, well, that had COVID. So now I'm out for 14 days self quarantine at home. But I feel by doing that, I'm doing my part. You know, not to discard everything, but to take into consideration that the, going back to the science, right? Because we say science right away. People are like, you can't believe in science, you believe in God. But the reality is these things are true. We see that, you know, that again, you know, COVID's transmitted through droplets. As we're talking now that COVID's come out, I never thought I was a spitter, but I'm a spitter. My stuff's getting little droplets on it, and within that, you could see it that's true, that there are droplets that are going forth, right? And being considerate of your neighbor also. You know, a lot of younger people, they don't seem to have the side effects as the elderly people do or whatnot. But then you get people with underlying conditions, and that's a whole different thing, to where they're almost facing death, and some of them do die. Before I even got on this call dealing with work, I had gotten calls that two people were exposed as well, and it's going back to hanging out with their family members. And me and my boss were talking about it, that it's just, that's when people let down their guard. Also too is when they're hanging out with family, because they're like, their family, we don't need to wear a mask, everything's good. And within, like I said, those last 10 minutes, two of my calls was dealing with issues that people went to birthday parties and were in contact with someone that had COVID. So what does that do? In the term of the health field, and we see it with the hospitals, it's they're starting to take all the beds up right now. We're probably hitting crisis in the hospital area, as well as the healthcare field. In my field, man, we're struggling with staff to even keep staff on, and it's only going to get worse. And part of that is to do our part and be responsible to help stop the spread, right? And people will go back and say, you know, well, we were told to self quarantine for the 2 weeks. It didn't work, so we're going to abandon everything and just go out there and do what we do. and I think that's kind of not a great attitude, right? Because at the same time, the government and everybody was learning about it. They thought that would help it, and at the time when the practices were being done, going by the numbers again, right? The numbers did show that we did slow down the spread of it. We were at a point where, you know, restaurants started opening up and things like that, and now we're at a crucial spot where I think it could be a matter of the end of this week, next week, where we're going to probably see some pretty severe closures and stuff that people are not going to agree with. But again, it's one of those things: is do you close your eyes to the facts, or do you just go on and say faith over fear? You know, everybody's screaming faith over fear, and I've even seen just online, seeing some of these things, and people gathering in the word of faith over fear, but yet they're mass gathering. Right now, the church could function at 40%, while the rest of everybody cannot congregate with more than 5 people. I think the church is going to end up finding themselves somewhere where they're going to feel like their rights are going to be taken away. But the reality is we have leeway right now with that. And as the church as a whole, what I've seen, I don't think we're doing a good job with that leeway. And it's going to cause stricter restrictions on the church. And then people are going to be yelling, they're taking our rights. And it's not that they're necessarily taking our rights from us. Pastor Alonso, it's one of those things, and when I think about it more and more, you know, people, even myself, we want to continue on, we want to keep doing things, but until someone says, you know, here's the stopping point, and you need to stop. I feel some of us need that, including myself, that when it comes to that point and that line's drawn, it's either you're going to stop at that line because you know what, I'll know I'll continue going past that line unless someone tells me to stop. And it's going to be that point where we say, either we're going to listen and say, you know what, I'm going to keep going forward no matter what, but I need to use this word of stop because I know without it, I'm going to keep going, and it might not be to the best of my judgment.
Yeah, that's some good stuff, man. So there's 3 things that I want to kind of press on that you mentioned, and the first one is going to be by way of commentary. So I work in the judiciary, and like many other professional platforms, like restaurants or anything, there are associations or nonprofit groups that put together what they feel can be presented as maybe best practices, things that are proven to work, that there's a consistent model, and there is data behind the recommendations. And the judiciary has that in very large part through an organization called the National Center for State Courts. National Center for State Courts, really great people. They often spend more time researching in areas of higher population, with data that's freely given, and that's really all they have to be able to make some of the recommendations that they make. So, for instance, every couple of years, they do what's called a weighted time study. And so the weighted time study, you go through as a judiciary employee, depending on your role, and you log in 15-minute increments, all the things that you do during the day, usually over a 2-week period. It's not the most fun thing in the world, but that data is then used to argue and justify for why a court might need another judge, or a clerk's office might need more staff. Any number of things come out from that. But National Center for State Courts, like many of those professional organizations, often becomes the victim of what serves my convenience. So this is kind of the second point to tie together. Courts will say, well, the National Center for State Courts has advised strongly that, you know, whatever it is, and they use that data, that information, to support their position. But when the National Center for State Courts presents something that is probably a best practice, but it isn't what the court is trying to do. They say, well, National Center for State Courts, they're a tremendous organization, but the data that they're putting forward here, this doesn't match our population. And so we pick and choose what we feel is important. So this is the second point. It comes down in many instances, and for many people, it comes down to who's asking. So I'm not picking a side, because this show isn't for that. But if one particular candidate asks for people to do something, the people who generally support that candidate freely and willingly commit themselves to it. If someone that population group does not generally support as a candidate or a political party asks them to do something, they do the same thing that courts do with the National Center for State Courts. That's why it may work for you, but you're not part of our population group. You don't really know how things work for us. And so that data that you're saying, or those things that you're asking us to do, they don't line up, and here's why. All of those things work together for this third point. And that is, by and large, as a people, we struggle to get along with one another, and have for some time. People are going to say, well, it happened 4 years ago. Other people will say it was actually 12 years ago. Other people will point to different points on the calendar and said, this is when it happened. You've got the older evangelical crowd that says, well, it happened when we took God out of the schools. In reality, all of the difficulty in getting along with each other happened in Eden. The longer we're alive, the worse it gets. So would the nation or the state benefit greatly from a 6-week closure? You mentioned that people let their guard down, and what you end up with, instead of a static, firm timeline, you end up with a staggered timeline. So maybe someone who self-isolated in the first week, by the third week, they're fine. But the person who started in the second week isn't fine until the fourth. And the person who didn't do anything until the fourth week, they're just kind of out there and part of that whole spread. Do I want to shut down for 6 weeks? No. Can people afford to? No. Do the politicians in Washington who don't even know our names care? Not really. They might send out checks. They might not. They may offer to pay for everything in the universe. They might not. Any number of things could happen. But at the end of this, I kind of want this thing to go away. And I don't know if there's another way to do it other than literally, you're not coming into the state on I-25. And if you are, or I-40, and if you are, we got to find a way to track you. Now, does that freak a lot of people out? Yeah, it kind of does. Is that extreme? Maybe it's too extreme. Maybe we just close down local businesses. Maybe just things get delivered. Maybe Amazon makes all the money. I don't know. But I kind of want this thing to be done. And I want to get on to the next part of our lives and not chase this thing for a year or two.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of one of those things, they even call it, the term I've heard is COVID fatigue, where after a while you just drop all your awareness of COVID and go about until it's right at your door. And yeah, I do. I understand the what you were saying too. You kind of go along with what your candidate says or who's in charge, if you agree with them or not. So it's one of those things, that we all got to come to a point where we say we're tired of this. How are we going to beat this all together and try to do it? And is that day ever going to come? I think that's going to be the hard place to meet in the middle. So I don't know if that's going to be waiting for a vaccine, and then you have the people that say, oh, vaccine ain't going to help or whatnot. It's going to be like the flu shot. People get flu shots all the time and they still get the flu. We really don't know. But at this point, I'm kind of like, let's at least try something. If the vaccine comes out, and this is another controversial thing, well, I'm not going to take it or whatever. But I'm at the point where I'm tired of it, and if the vaccine does come out, I'm probably going to get it. And a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, how can you say that as a Christian?" Well, I'm saying it.
Yeah, I don't think that's really a Christian versus non-Christian debate, though. I mean, if I choose to get the vaccine, so I mean, let's put it in the context of salvation, right? Is my salvation fire insurance so that I don't go to hell? Because if it is, then it's a preventative, right? Is it a vaccine? Well, it's actually a cure. But the way most people engage in works-based salvation, they just keep taking a vaccine. Thoughts?
So what was that last part? Because you kind of froze up on my end.
Oh, okay. The last part was people that engage in works-based salvation are not taking the cure. They're only taking the vaccine.
Yeah, true. And so we really don't know. The future is uncertain, right? Um, what we do know is there's change. I was listening to a sermon talking about, um, I'm gonna stumble a little telling the story because I'll have to look at the exact scripture, but it talks about that the owner went by the fig tree and the fig tree wasn't producing fruit, and so the workers to rip it out, and the worker kind of pleads with them and says, give it a little time, and he tells them, the owner says, it's been so many years that it hasn't produced fruit, rip it out, and the worker says, let me work with it, and so Ron Carpenter did the sermon about this when I was listening, and it really made me think. He said what happened was they had to go and mix up the dirt with soil, right? They had to go get some crap that was out there, and he was pertaining this kind of to what we're going through now. You took some crap to go and transplant and mix with the soil in order to make that fig tree stop being in its usual comfort spot, to stop being in its way of not producing fruit, being okay with that. And let's go mix its world up per se, throw some new things in there, and then all of a sudden the fig tree started producing fruit. So the way he had said this, because in California, they're straight streaming. That's their reality, is they're streaming, and that's where Ron Carpenter and some of these other guys are at. And he said that what happens now is what he's seeing is some of that soil is being mixed, being stirred up, that has not produced fruit from some of the trees that we've seen throughout time, or throughout where the church is now. And through this, he's seen it as a way of our world's being changed, like the soil, and in order that our world's being changed, it actually is going to cause some of us to produce fruit that we never thought we could produce, and reach those who we never thought we could reach. I know I think it's his online church. He's saying that his online church has blew up past what he ever thought it could ever go, and that he's seen so many salvations that he never thought he would see having live services. But because of this mixing and the stirring of the soil, it has caused him to put Reese's and other avenues that he never thought of doing. And he's saying that he's bearing fruit, and the fruit is amazing that
Yeah.
that is coming in because of this.
Well, we've talked about this at length over the course of, the past, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years, in different ways. And for me, it started just kind of small. Well, for me, it started with the idea that as Gentile believers, we often lose regard for the importance of our adoption. And so we assume that because we're American Christians, that the Bible and everything belongs to us, when in reality, we had no part. We were aliens, foreigners, strangers to the Commonwealth of Israel, but were brought near by the blood of Christ, and only because of the blood of Christ were we brought near. So for a very large, for a very long time, the church has operated under this model that we're currently under. Now, you had people in the 17, 1800s that went from town to town, ministering and preaching the gospel. But church today, and I wasn't there to be a witness in those days, but I can read history books. But church today is so program focused and so structure driven, and there's a difficulty for many to step out of that mindset and minister differently. So like you shared, Ron Carpenter and many others, they're like, boom, man, I cannot believe how much the church is growing. And others are out there struggling because they're like, but I need people in my building and I refuse to go where they are. And so when we have that hard-heartedness, we're really at a disadvantage to making a difference. Now, we were talking the other day in the leadership meeting about different ways to minister, and there have been instances where people are using broadcast devices, not necessarily streaming, but to have drive-in services. And well, I'm not an environmentalist. I love the outdoors and I love this planet, and I am a conservationist. I want to preserve this planet for generations beyond my child. I don't like seeing masks and rubber gloves thrown around, but I also don't think it's a great idea for the environment and pollution and everything else to have people sitting in cars idling. It's bad for the car. It's bad for the environment. For me, it seems like it's a way to try and keep doing things the way that we were doing them, so that it kind of looks like what we were doing and it feels somewhat normal. But that reference to the Bible about having to mix in some stuff that maybe isn't pleasant in order to produce fruit. I think churches have struggled. I don't care how big you are. I think churches have struggled to produce biblical fruit. They may be producing programmatic fruit that aligns with their program or their theology, but I'm not sure that they've been generating biblical fruit. The Bible says each person stands or falls before their master. I'm not making assumptions, but I do think about those things.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is a different time, right? We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So with that, I think is the challenge is how do we minister differently and effectively with what's before us. And I say what's before us because a lot of times we think, well, I got to get this and that before I could do this and that, and realizing, what's before us, and for a lot of us is technology, and most people I know have smartphones, except for Brother John, but most people I know have smartphones, and that's a way there, even just sharing encouraging words or checking up on people, right? But I think this is a time to really challenge each other, or challenge yourselves, and how effective ministry is or isn't that you're already doing.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up in a lot of leadership development stuff, you may have heard of Lean Six Sigma, which is an efficiency evaluation process where you look to cut out waste, trim things that are unnecessary, maintain focus. a lot of churches would say, well, if this ministry has under, this number of people, we'll promote it, we'll try and get it out there. But if it doesn't work, then we're going to just cut it off because it's not producing fruit. Well, it may be producing fruit, but it's not producing programmatic fruit. And I think that's where the church finds itself, even with statements like, faith over fear. And I'm not picking on the rally that happened the other day, although the pictures on Facebook show a bunch of folks not wearing masks. I'm just not, I don't want to be part of that. To assume that a church is filled with fear because they're doing things differently is it is a bad premise. As far as a logical argument goes, it is not grounded in reality or things which can be demonstrated or proved to be true. A church who has chosen to do things, whether through wisdom or prudence, differently from what other churches do, should be given the liberty to stand or fall before their own master. And in the same regard, those churches who are doing things differently from how freedom is doing them, they have that same liberty to stand or fall. But for those desiring to walk in prudence, I don't and won't be vilified for being cautious.
Yeah, I agree. Because I've been thinking about this today a lot, and even faith over fear. Some people might say, well, that's our thing. That's what we that's ours. That's what we call. You're taking shots at us, and it's not. If you remember, Brother Alonzo, when we were together in Ruidoso, when the governor started this, and Men of Iron was called Faith Over Fear, and ever since then, it's just ringing up left and right from a lot of believers. Faith over fear, faith over fear. I know if I get on Facebook right now, there'll be Christian shirts that'll come up as a sponsor thing saying faith over fear, right? But I think it's very important to understand the difference with prudence, like you had said, and I was thinking about that, to be cautious, cautionary. To me, that's being wise also. It's one of those things, and we've said it in passing and stuff, that we're kind of living in the modern day snake handling era, where you don't know if you're going to pick up a snake and it's going to bite you, right? And so, kind of relating prudence to that, is it fear if someone knows that the nature of picking up a snake is for them to bite you, and they choose not to pick up the snake? Is that fear to them, or is that somewhat of wisdom or prudence?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I think you and I have very different news feeds. I don't get a whole lot of Christian t-shirts that come up that say faith over fear. But I will tell you right now, my count on Mandalorian and Star Wars stuff is pretty high. I was looking at some helmets earlier today. I really want to get a helmet because it sort of serves as a face shield. I want to get a Mandalorian helmet. I don't want a Boba Fett one that I have to fill the dent and like sand it and paint it. But I just can't bring myself to shell out that kind of cash. So I don't know if maybe one of our viewers out there feels led that they want to bless a minister with a sweet Mandalorian helmet, but just putting it out there. But going back to the thing that matters, that's something that we've talked about a lot. For an outsider, for an unbeliever, looking at the church, and let's say this is a person who, in this time of challenge, is feeling that pull, and they are moving toward this revelation and this desire to seek God and reconnect. And they say, but you know what? as unsure as I am about so many things in this world, I also want to protect me and my family. And if what they see are a bunch of people who say we must be humble like Christ, but are out protesting American freedoms instead of Christian freedom, I can see how that would damage witness. I am a citizen of the United States of America in the state of New Mexico, but my primary citizenship is in heaven. And I don't have someone that runs for office. I have an eternal leader who has always been exactly where he is and who he is. And I'm going to fight for that Christian freedom, the freedom to serve God. And I'm just not going to be part of the noise and the static that I think detracts from the message of humility in the gospel.
Yeah. So while you were saying that too, I was thinking, could this be, and I'm not big I'm not big about talking about Satan and stuff, but could this be a tactic to all this noise, and while you're making this noise, to scare some people off, and because if you look, that's where Satan kind of thrives, is when there's chaos and confusion. That's when he seems to thrive and cause some things, right? So what do we do during this time? I think it's a time that we get our focus, if it's even off of Jesus, refocus on Christ, and like you said, humility. What are some ways we could show humility to others while others are screaming out, you got to be this and that, and kind of irate or chaotic all with us, and just add to more noise.
Yeah, that's a good question. Martin Luther once said, and I'm paraphrasing just slightly, not Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant Reformation. He said that the devil is the greatest teacher of theology the world has ever known. A couple things in that statement that are really important to grasp. And that is the difference between being taught of Holy Spirit and being taught of theology in the world. When Holy Spirit teaches, Holy Spirit reveals the heart of God. And as you said, the devil thrives in chaos. Satan, the accuser, thrives in chaos. And you're absolutely right. And so when there is disparity between what God said and what he meant by what he said, and how we're choosing to use those words and how we apply them, and whether we're using those words to be those that build peace and unity, that develop cohesion, that work together toward moving in the direction that God has called us to, or insisting that somebody has something that you don't, or that you want what's yours that you think someone took from you, then we are viewing exactly what it looks like to see the difference between the teacher of theology, Holy Spirit, and the greatest teacher of theology the world has ever known. And I think that for us to make progress as a Christian people, I think we need to reconcile who we are listening to as that teacher of theology. From whom do we get our information?
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's going back to, I believe, examining the word and examining ourselves, right? This has been a period since March of examining ourselves, examining the world that we live in, and what's going on around us. I remember talking with Pastor George. He had told me that God had talked to him about, the mask was that God, that he took, that he took it as God wanted us to be quiet and to observe everything that was going around us, observe our lifestyle, and hear what was happening, right? Because we're always so quick to blurt things out or to speak, and that was, I just remember that was pretty powerful. What he told me is he feels that God's saying this for a little bit and realize what's going on, and hear and see what's happening around us. And I think some of that is evaluating how effective are we, in our Christian walk and what we do. um you know, and it's, again, it's a time of re-examining ourselves. I remember starting the year off, everybody was echoing, 2020, the year of vision. And when I was thinking of it, I was like, man, some people got some pretty jacked up vision this year, right? And I remember, in January, I had went out and said that this was the year of LASIK, right? And what I meant by that was, you know, some of those things that are damaged, that this is going to be the year to repair those. And what I specifically, what was envisioning, was relationships were going to be repaired, right? And that's what the Spirit was showing me. And throughout the year, um, I have seen that. And if you guys haven't used this opportunity to do that, reach out to some of those people and repair some of those relationships. But because right now they don't have a whole lot of places to go and a whole lot to do. So right now would be the time to start repairing some of those relationships and having some of those conversations that all of us haven't wanted to have for a while, right?
So, since we're nearing the end of the broadcast, so let me just kind of throw this out there. This sort of settled in my spirit as you were sharing. Um, we know, as people who've been in ministry, that we can definitely get wrapped up in the whole business of ministry and get ourselves to a position of fatigue and exhaustion, just because we just like can't stop sometimes.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you know, kind of the idea of, being quiet, observing your own life, looking at things, working on relationships, developing, curing, fixing, helping. How many people really don't like spending time with themselves? And it's a whole lot better to be busy trying to get around people, because I really I don't like it in between here. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the sad part is that that's a scary feeling for a lot of people. During this time, I think it opens the doors up for people having suicidal thoughts, and that's the scary part of kind of that silence. So again, if you're out there, and you're thinking of someone, give them a call. You never know, that very call could be what saves their lives.
Right?
And I won't discuss the details, but I started my day off with hearing about someone losing a family member because they blew their brains out. And it's one of those things, like, during this time, yes, it's a time of reflection, but at the same time, check up on people. Maybe that's the way the Lord could really use you at this time, is to be checking in with people and engaging with people. Do I mean you have to be in person with them? No, but you could answer the phone. You could make a quick phone call. You could check in with people, and maybe some of that time that we use to stay busy for busy sake, use it as a time to be intentional and to reach out to people and to check on them and let them know that you love them. And when they feel that love coming from you, they'll know that there's a God that loves them.
Spoken like a true pastor.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, there's. I think the silence for some is deafening, and you bring up a very important point. Um, if we as a people insist on interacting the way we always have. We'll never really learn how to do it in different ways. You know, we're not affiliated or sponsored with anything from anyone, but you can get a free Zoom account and connect with friends and family on Zoom. You can connect with friends and family through Google Hangouts, FaceTime. I'm sure there's others, but you know, if that desire for human interaction is there, you can either spend your time wanting it to be different than what's available, or making good use of what you have and enjoying every moment of it, and not wasting time that we're not guaranteed to have. And for me, in our house, and I know the same is for yours, we're staying engaged with the people that we love, and with the calling that God's given us, but it does look different. And I think we're okay with different.
And so I think that's a very good point. Is, you know, I think we're too busy looking at how do we get things back to the way they were, and the reality is I don't think we're ever going to get back there. So being able to sit and say things are going to be different and being okay with that, I think that's kind of how we move forward.
So just a little bit of backstory. I'll tell you kind of how that phrase came to be, right? Like, people say, "Oh, time heals all wounds." No, not always. In fact, sometimes the wounds that aren't resolved or dealt with, they come back later with a vengeance. 2010, my mom was killed in a car crash, and you know, this was a couple months after, you know, somebody came by my dad's shop, and I was, you know, there, you know, checking on him or whatever. It was a Saturday, and I was hanging out with him, whatever it was, and they were talking about that idea that time heals all wounds. And this was a person who had lost their spouse. And I was there when this conversation took place. It was incredibly powerful. The person said, "You know, people are going to tell you that it gets better with time. And that's the wrong way to look at it. It's not a matter of better or worse. It's a matter of it being different. And learning to be okay with different is how you move forward." And the death of our old way of life, pretty apparent right now. It's not a matter of better or worse. It is a matter of different. And learning to be okay with different is the only way that we're going to move forward.
Yes, I believe that. Good message. I think that's a great way to end table talk. And I think if people let that resonate for a little bit, and even thinking about how it is different without that person that's been there all your life, and how much that changes things, but being able to say, you know, I know it's different, and whether it is with hurts, and the way I understand it is, you know, these hurts keep coming. It's just learning how to deal with them differently, like you said. And I think that's just so profound, brother. And I love you. I know I didn't know your mother, but I know from talking to you, she's special.
Yeah.
Always has a special place in your heart.
Yeah, man, she spoke some stuff prophetically over me, not being a Christian the way we understand it. She spoke some stuff over me, and she definitely lived to see a lot of that come to pass. And we carry on that legacy by being the right kind of people, and learning to love others. All right.
Amen.
So are you going to sing the table talk song, or are we just going to let it just kind of die there? You don't want to hear me sing it.
Yeah, I don't think they. Yeah, I don't think they want to hear me sing either.
All right.
But God bless you guys. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see
Thanks
you
for
next
hanging out,
Monday
man.
at 5:00.
Next
Yeah.
Monday at 5. All right. Blessings.
God bless you.